This week's readings for the second Sunday of Advent is shot through with hope and challenge. Please take a few moments to read the readings and then join me here. Abraham Heschel, arguably one of the most important Jewish thinkers of the 20th century, said that a true prophet of God afflicts the comfortable and comforts the afflicted. Our first reading this weekend is from Isaiah, and he models this description. The first 39 chapters of our prophet is afflicting the comfortable, trying to wake up an obstinate and unrepentant people. They reject his call, sadly, and they end up exiled in Babylon and in desperate need of hope. Well, enter our first reading, Isaiah 40, which begins the second theme of the prophet's book and Heschel's description of a prophet. Here, he's comforting the afflicted. In fact, the reading itself begins with that mission. Comfort, give comfort to my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her service has ended. Or sometimes it's translated, her warfare has come to an end. Isaiah's oracle is a much-needed light at the end of the tunnel for the exiles. What's the source of that comfort? Well, it's the message of a mysterious figure declaring from the desert, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the wasteland a highway for our God. Every valley shall be filled in, every mountain and hill shall be made low. The rugged land shall be made a plain, and the rough country a broad valley. Isaiah goes on to say, it's then that the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all people shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Centuries before he is born, another prophet, John the Baptist, is predicted here. And when he steps into the scene in this week's gospel from Mark chapter 1, he echoes this ancient oracle, which is both instructive and inspirational. The Lord will be coming in his glory, but he's asking his prophet to set the stage, to clear the roads, to remove any obstacle to his coming. He's proclaiming then a baptism of repentance to prepare the people for the coming of the Messiah. Sometimes it helps to hear this sentiment, this mission and message of John in more modern language. And so for this we turn to Eugene Peterson's translation. Prepare for God's arrival, he says. Make the road smooth and straight. And from Luke, where we get the fuller quote, every ditch will be filled in, every bump will be smoothed out, all of the detours will be eliminated, and all the ruts and potholes paved over. So you see, John's ministry was to make a direct and unobstructed path between God and his people, removing the greatest obstacle, which is sin, through a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of their sins. Now, as followers of Christ, we share the same mission of John. And the purpose of Advent is very John the Baptist in its orientation. It's a call to clear a path for the Lord, to make a clear-eyed examination of any obstacle, any obstruction, any barrier or burden that keeps Christ from coming to us and from us running to Christ. Listen to the opening prayer, the collect of this week's Mass. Almighty and merciful God, may no earthly undertaking hinder those who set out in haste to meet your Son. So it's a call to encounter, and it's a call to a kind of spiritual house cleaning. It's why we traditionally have Advent penance services. Now, in this year of COVID, we're offering many additional moments to go to confession on the Wednesdays of Advent so that we have as many opportunities as possible to remove from our lives those sins which keep us from fully giving ourselves to Christ and fully welcoming him into our hearts anew. Then, as the opening collect says, we can set out in haste to meet the Son. I love how Hebrews 12 puts it. It says, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings to us so closely, and let us instead run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Another way we can welcome Jesus is in service to the poor, bringing justice, that is, to give each his due, to our world. And that's what our responsorial psalm is speaking of, Psalm 85. It says that justice shall walk before the Messiah and prepare the way of his steps. Our almsgiving, our loving service unburdens us from the selfishness and ego which keep us from giving ourselves fully to God. So when we turn our hearts to the other, we're clearing a pathway for Jesus to come into their lives and into our lives. As we mentioned in our How to Welcome and Engage Advent video earlier, look for any safe opportunity you have this season to serve others. Advent can even be a time to let go of any material possessions, encumbrances that we don't need, that in a sense can clutter our homes, our lives, our psyches, our emotional well-being. I have a friend who puts out several industrial trash bags at the beginning of every Advent, and each day of the season she puts something in it for charity that she doesn't need to keep in her house anymore. Another possession that's just cluttering her life. So she reviews all the objects in her house on a regular basis, and she asks, why do I have this object? Am I using it? Or is it sentimental, or does it give me joy? And if that object or piece of clothing doesn't meet one of those conditions, she gives it away. So we can dispense, get away from, unencumber ourselves from sin, from any inordinate attachment to material possessions or gathering clutter in our life that becomes a kind of obstacle. And then finally, this Sunday in the Mass, we get to experience a foretaste of this encounter with God, where we clear a path for Him and He clears a path for us. It's in the Eucharist that we are privileged to meet Christ anew, spiritually ready now, hopefully, unburdened by going to reconciliation and by our regular repentance, so our hands and hearts are free and open because they're not clinging to things or resentments or sin. We're free to welcome Him fully and faithfully and fruitfully into our life. As the psalmist says this week, in a beautiful description of when we receive Eucharist, kindness and truth shall meet, justice and peace shall kiss. So let's each make a commitment this Advent to clear a pathway for Christ, to prepare a path for Him to meet us in the sacraments and in our service to others.